This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Melissa Hallam from Scottish Enterprise. In celebration of International Women's Day 2021, Scottish Enterprise has brought together a panel of our GlobalScots to exchange ideas and experiences on achieving diversity within organisations. GlobalScot is a network of influential business leaders, entrepreneurs, innovators and academics who share their knowledge, expertise and connections from around the world to support businesses in Scotland. Our panel is being chaired by Scottish Enterprise board member and GlobalScot, Dr. Poonam Malik, and I'll now hand over to Dr. Malik to begin the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and I have a spectacular group of panelists with me. So I'll just start by saying that we are gathered here today to celebrate the International Women's Day 2021. We have all had a tough year, to say the least, but today is the celebration day. And the objective of this roundtable for us to come together are twofold. First is to profile the existing diversity of our wonderful GlobalScot network. And I have an ask with that, is to leverage members, our GlobalScots profile and connections to encourage further diversity in future recruitment of GlobalScot members, and also help our Scottish companies globally worldwide with their network and resources. And our second objective today is to promote Scottish Enterprise and Scottish Development International's commitment as a national economic development agency to diversify networks and raise awareness of brilliant GlobalScot diaspora that we have among our diverse audiences. So I'll tell you a little bit about the GlobalScot network, and then I'll introduce our wonderful panelists. So our GlobalScots are an impressive collection of business leaders, entrepreneurs, innovators, academics, and community leaders that are committed to promoting Scotland across the world. So welcome all. The GlobalScot network is strongly aligned to Scottish Government's trade and investment strategies, which highlights the industries and the markets where Scotland can promote and compete globally. The network has been built to exchange knowledge and to establish connections in those priority markets and sectors, hence you might want to be watching out. However, we also recognize that Scotland's economic strategy is driven by a clear set of values to support fair work, net zero transition in this critical year of COP26 in Glasgow, and sustainable and inclusive economic growth. Our Scottish companies, inward investors, increasingly position value at the center of their mission statement and focus on the wider benefit they contribute to society beyond simply generating profit. So we therefore recognize that these significant opportunities to diversify our GlobalScot network to align more deliberately with a values-led approach and to ensure businesses in Scotland have access to a richer array of skills, expertise, which diversity will increase. Gender and ethnic diversity have now been indisputably correlated with business performance and profitability. But studies also show that women and ethnic minorities, people of color, although that came to prominence last year with incidents in America, they remain underrepresented in senior leadership positions. So that's where our GlobalScots come into picture. And now I will introduce the wonderful panelists we have with us. So introducing first our first panelist, Jo Stent. Jo is CFO as Argentex and a GlobalScot. She's got 25 years of financial expertise, the majority of which at the senior business level, responsible for all aspects of finance function in addition to broader business responsibilities. And Jo is passionate about innovation and culture and known for delivering results, building strong teams, and creating values. Welcome, Jo. And our second panelist is Gary Steele. we are talking diversity, we have to have male colleagues here. Without them, we cannot achieve any of our function. Hence, we welcome Gary here. Gary is broad-based global business experience at both non-executive and executive levels. He's lived and worked in multiple places, including UK, Monaco, Gabon, Netherlands, and Switzerland. I suppose yesterday when we spoke, he was enjoying Portuguese wine in Scotland somewhere. Direct business expertise of Europe, Asia, Middle East, and Africa and Americas. And he's partially retired, so very useful to us still, and living in Scotland and Portugal. And he retains a passion for inclusive leadership and people management. Our third panelist is Stacey Shira. Welcome, Stacey. Stacey is VP Global Talent Management, leads the talent management function for Covetrus. She is responsible for Covetrus' global talent strategy, including building a strong talent bench across the organization. Her roles include hiring the very best people and partner closely with business to help them thrive. I'm sure she can tell us a lot of tips about recruitment. Stacey is all about the experience and culture of an organization and helping people succeed. She firmly believes that employees are a company's strength and the most important factor in determining an organization's future success. Welcome, Stacey. And our fourth panelist is Shivon Pandya. She's a Senior Director of Business Assurance and Excellence at Mary Kay Inc., a global skincare cosmetic company based in Texas, Dallas. Shivon joined this company after 17 years with Shell Oil, during which time she relocated to US for personal reasons. She is responsible now for continuous improvement, internal audit, and business continuity. In addition to being a GlobalScot, she is a Global Council member at ACCA and a board member at First Candle. So welcome all. As I initially said, that we are here to discuss strategies, how to link diversity better to business value. And I am hoping to manage 3 themes today and would like your thoughts on those 3 themes. So introducing first theme, I would say my first topic that I would like your thoughts on is diversity and the bottom line. Greater equality is associated with greater economic stability and more sustainable growth, as well as higher talent retention and enhanced productivity. Gender and ethnic diversity are now indisputably correlated with business performance and profitability. But then why are we still discussing this in 2021? Because studies show that women and ethnic minority people of color still remain underrepresented in the senior leadership position, in boardroom, in the listed companies. There is a global need to increase the number of women entrepreneurs and startup leaders, and this is well understood. However, it is also the fact that new businesses headed by women are less likely to secure funding, and it was shown that less than 3% of venture funding goes to women founders, even though over time they have shown to perform and risk management better, and companies do perform better. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that. How well are the links between inclusion and profit actually understood? How do companies understand this? And can we articulate this link better so that companies start to do something differently? Gary, would you like to tell me a bit more about that?
I'll try, in my view. And in all honesty, Poonam, I believe in everything you've said, but I don't think the belief in some of these linkages is sufficiently pervasive in the world of business so far. So I think there's a lot of heavy lifting still to do. And I think the secret lies in tangible stories and examples of where these things have happened, rather than broad brush reports and research and so on. There's no doubt in my mind that having gender and ethnic diversity on any decision-making team enhances the decision-making outcomes of those teams. I think there's plenty of studies that show having, for example, a female on a board enhances corporate governance as well as profitability. But I do feel strongly that the emphasis on boards and management teams, whilst important, is way insufficient. I do believe we need to tackle the issue right through the talent pipeline, from recruitment to the C-suite and the board. And I don't think enough is done at those lower levels. The example I would offer from my own time in ABB was that in joining there in 2003, we had 3% of women in the top management ranks. And yet when I studied it in more detail, I found that we hired 30% of our graduate intake were females. So to go from 30% to 3% means we were doing something wrong. Now, loads of people told me women aren't interested in engineering, but I just don't buy that. I just don't accept it. If 30% of our intake, which was predominantly engineers, join ABB, how come we're only getting 3% out the other end? It's our problem. And so what we said about doing, and I'll say more about this later on with the last topic you want to raise, we had to objectivize the whole selection, development, and appraisal process. It was far too biased towards males, frankly blonde males, and frankly Swedish males. And by the time I left ABB, that 3% had come to 15%. And I do believe they're probably closer to 20% today. Now, is that enough? Absolutely not. But it's a heck of a lot better than it was some, I don't know, nearly 20 years ago now. So my view is the only way to get through this is start to develop and start to develop a narrative around examples of this kind of success. Because there is no doubt, ABB, by the way, in the meantime, went from tremendous losses in 2003, before I joined them, to very significant profits in 2014 when I left. The proof of the pudding is there for me.
Thank you, Gary. You've highlighted the importance of actually data, that if you look into it, you can find out where the problems are. From what it appears that the selection sieve has some major holes in it, and the 30% was draining down to 3%. I'm surprised even 3%, but also it's what is useful to identify where the problems was, and what you highlighted is the importance of creating that pipeline from the bottom up, so that our leaders can rise up and they are not suddenly laterally entering from somewhere because they are not there. Shivon, can I bring you into the discussion and say, how do you think that we can articulate the link between inclusion, diversity, and profit a bit better?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think I'll probably echo a lot of what you've heard from Gary. I think the first thing that I'll say is, we talk about this link between, diversity and inclusiveness and profitability, but I think there's also something that we're missing there, and that's also around workplace happiness, right? So, there was a recent study done where workplace happiness is made up of several elements, things like reward and recognition, empowerment, job satisfaction, instilling pride, along with several other elements. And I think we need to make sure that we focus on those areas as well. So it's not just about the selection at the beginning all the way through to the board positions, but also once women are selected or the right candidate is selected, how are we focusing on creating this workplace happiness, because that in itself is going to help you drive profitability. And obviously we know in some of the areas that I've mentioned, those are more important to women versus other areas. I will say that I'm in my 20 plus years of working, I've worked for companies that have always had provided the guidance that says it's the right person in the right role at the right time. It's never been we need a woman in this role or we need a man in this role. It's always been about the right person, and I think that's really important. And having that, as Gary mentioned, at the different levels of an organization. So are you bringing on graduate engineers, male or female, Are you bringing in mid-level managers, again, from the males or females? Who's the right person for the role all the way up to the board is going to be something that's very critical for companies to maintain. For me, I'm lucky enough that the culture of the company that I work for, so it was founded by a woman who was in her 50s, and it was founded on the basis that she was being discriminated against in her existing job. So she wasn't being given promotions because she was a woman, and it was considered that, well, she has to go home and take care of the family, so she's not going to be able to provide the same commitment as we would get from a man. So what did she do? She went off and created her own multi-billion-dollar company. And so part of what we have in our culture is empowering women, supporting women, giving women that opportunity. And that goes back to what Gary said, is how are we giving the opportunities at different levels? Because when we give opportunities to the right people, you will see that translate into the profitability.
Thank you, Shivon. You highlighted two very key points. One is the value of well-being and happiness, which is very much related to inclusion, because it's one thing to diversify the organization, but it's another thing totally to make the environment suitable and inclusive enough for everybody to retain that talent. And that is the key for maintaining that pipeline, as you also highlighted with your example, that because your original founder was not feeling included enough part of the family, but that there is a lesson in there that if nobody gives you opportunities, then you create your own opportunity. And in that case, that's what she went on and did. Wonderful. So that'll, I'll now bring in Stacey, I'll bring you in there and ask you, in your opinion, on what are the common barriers that you see today in relation to diversity and inclusion that you're hearing at the moment, and how can we overcome them?
Thank you, Poonam. The misunderstanding the business case for diversity. So increasing diversity, it does not on its own increase effectiveness. What matters is how an organization harnesses that diversity and whether it's willing to reshape its power structure. So increasing the number of traditionally underrepresented people in the workforce, again, doesn't automatically produce benefits. If you take a add diversity and stir approach while your business continues as usual, it's not going to leap the firm's effectiveness on financial performance. Diversity brings many benefits to organizations. It's not enough just on its own. The organization with a diverse workforce is not necessarily an inclusive one. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Organizations are complex. They have different internal logistics, cultures, dynamics. It's not enough to just say we can do this and it will therefore work. The context really matters. It should be counted for when companies are deciding on how to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion, straight through from when you're hiring, straight through to every position. At Covetrus, we have distribution centers. Those are incubators for talent for us, because that's where a lot of the diversity is. And how we structure every single thing we do, how do we give opportunities for rotations, for internal mobility, giving people economic options where they are not only in a distribution center, but we can help give them training and develop them from within. That will not only foster inclusion and also the diversity, but really makes a difference over time at those senior positions.
Thank you, Stacey. I think you have highlighted wonderfully for everybody who was listening is that how once we recruit people, what do you do to retain them? How do you make them feel better? And also sometimes people leave organization because they feel trapped or they feel boxed, while you also discuss the rotating and giving them opportunities to grow. And as it is said, that whatever you said, it's people leave because how you made them feel. And if you didn't make them feel welcome, if you didn't make them feel nicer, they will not stay. And which is more the case in related to what Shivon and Gary were saying us initially, that it's the happiness and it's the well-being of people if you want to retain and grow along the company so that they go on to make the 30%, even to the top 30% in that case. Joe, can I bring you into the discussion now and ask you your thoughts on what do you think are the different definitions of success in business? What does success mean, and how do different motivations work to achieve that success for various companies and businesses?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Poonam. I mean, I think first of all, I'd like to address the point on, we have demonstrated through various studies over the years in terms of the direct link between enhanced profitability in financial terms with the increased diversity that an organization might have. And I think often we kind of obsess a bit too much about that because it's often equality, for me at least, is simply the right thing to do. Regardless of the business case, but the business case and the studies are there. I think increasingly, though, organizations are held more and more accountable to report on and to demonstrate their contribution to society, to the planet, various ESG agenda that we may have. And so I think that will drive, a reason to sort of promote equality and diversity. Then I think, secondly, even just our idea of, so just sort of touching on your points, Stacey, in terms of, how do we make people feel included? Once we've done the hiring and we have, what looks like diversity, how do we kind of make that effective and make all individuals feel included in the organizational agenda? And I think it's simply by letting people be authentic, allowing people to be themselves. If we think about historically and traditionally, what does a good leader look like? I mean, we probably all thought about that as a traditionally male archetype, and sometimes a traditionally negative male archetype. You must be aggressive and you must be command and control, and quite simply that. And the assumption would then be that, oh well, women don't fit into that stereotype or that archetype, and most men, thankfully, don't either. So I think driving those narratives to your point, Gary, and and allowing people to be authentic while connected to the organization's values. I mean, that has to be there as well. We'll start to drive that change in definition of what it is to be successful in the workplace. And the reporting and having to demonstrate that through the kind of various other agendas will kind of drive organizations towards it, I think.
Thank you, Joe. So I think that has been a wonderful discussion on trying to link the diversity to the bottom line, and how can organization first use data to analyze where there is a leaky pipeline, as it is called, where we are having a sieve with the giant holes where the talent is dripping away. And on the second point, then moving on to say we have used the data, but how are we making the conditions inside the organization so well that everybody feel included, everybody feels part of it, and they want to grow with the company. And you make, and if anything, the last COVID-19 year has shown us is that well-being of people, thinking about others and around us in the community. And similarly in Covetrus, for a change, we have become more kind. We have become kinder to each other, and we start opening and asking, how are you doing? Earlier, the bottom line had become so important that we had forgotten the basic norms of humanity, and asking even what's happening in your life felt strange. So I think it's a good thing to return, but also how to retain that. Some of the good tips you heard about what to give people in terms of rotation, giving their career development opportunities. And finally, in terms of the 5 Ps that you were indicating to, Joe, in terms of people, planet, purpose, and then prosperity, and it's becoming more important about the ESG agenda, that are ecological or environmental reasons, as well as social and governance factors are becoming key. And as long as every organization thinks about having an ESG strategy and the funders align to those matrices, I am sure we can come up with better measures to take care of that triple bottom line, and companies can grow with a diverse force. So with that, thank you very much. And now I would like to move to the second topic, in which that if we want to make these changes, if we want to improve the environment and bring a diverse kind of a people and change in the way we measure things, who should we be talking to? Are we actually talking to the right people? So my second topic theme for the day is talking to the people, and the right people indeed. So for years, diversity and inclusion research has focused on every cohort other than those who hold the most power. But inclusion cannot happen unless it is driven by the heart of the organization. Social movements such as Black Lives Matter and Me Too have made systemic injustices in society and workplace part of the global conversations we have all awakened in the last year. I mean, it is a bit of a shame that it took a crisis to bring us to that point, or it took the death of somebody to bring us to that kind of a movement. But better late than never. Studies such as the one from Center for Talent Innovation demonstrate that most of the majority men, that is 90%, place some value on diversity and inclusion. Some is the main factor there. And 42% believe that it is very or extremely important to them at progress. So there is some progress there as well. However, gender parity is often discussed by women, between women, for women. Do you think that we will ever succeed that way when more than 90% of the positions of power in all listed companies and bigger organization and senior management, as Gary just described, the ratio of 30% to 3%, is by men? So unless we have our male colleagues part of that discussion, we are not going to be able to bring change by just talking among ourselves. We need to make this conversation broader, a part of a general agenda that we discuss. So for that, I would like to bring you back, Jo, in to say, have you seen any prejudices in the workplaces? And if not seen, if you've heard about these things, then how do you think that these can be challenged?
Sure, of course. I mean, I think, over the years, there's probably been various, experiences kind of shared amongst colleagues that, I can reference. But I think, when we talk about prejudice, that can often be that's quite a negative word. It can resonate quite negatively, and it can create a lot of fear. And I think for me, it kind of translates to the conditioning that we all bring. So, where we grow up, what kind of culture we grow up in, where we're educated, how we sort of move through life before we come to the workplace. We carry all of that baggage, if you like, with us to the workplace, all of us. I hit mute by mistake. So I think that conditioning or that baggage creates certain assumptions and preconceived notions. So for example, if a woman has just, given birth and has a new baby, maybe that creates, or I've sort of been aware of situations where that has created a preconceived notion that perhaps that woman might not be interested in a promotion or, a stretch project, and that individual is automatically excluded, from those conversations. Or, for example, situations where there might be a difficult account or a difficult client, and there's a preconceived notion, and perhaps very well intended, where an individual may have grown up with the conditioning or the belief that women are delicate and to be protected, and it's very well intended, that maybe that individual can't handle the difficult client or the difficult account, when actually that individual may not have those characteristics or that conditioning herself and may flourish in that kind of environment. So I think, those are just examples that I think, most of us are probably aware of in some fashion, in the workplace. And I think there are ways to solve it, and I think it's about sharing and about developing empathy. First of all, having self-awareness to understand what our own conditioning is and our own beliefs are, to understand how those play out in decision making, and to challenge ourselves to have that at the front of our minds when we're making decisions, such that it becomes the part of the fabric of the organization, rather than that side agenda that sometimes, you know, gender diversity can have, you know. So I think for me, it's creating those safe spaces to have constructive conversations in an appropriate way.
Thank you, Joe. Absolutely. What you are pointing out here is putting at the heart of the issue is communication and those clear and transparent discussion and creating the safe spaces, because the other key point there was the assumptions, because as you said, that people may assume either because they have had the experiences like that or they have thought about that. Whether rather than making assumptions, I think it's busting assumptions and trying to step forward and asking that rather than, I mean, this is it's the personal experience when I have seen it happening, as you said, when people come back, people don't offer, they might be coming from the goodness of their heart, but in also, you're denying an opportunity for somebody just by trying to save them, not offering the opportunity if they've come back from maternity leave. So it's better to ask and the person to take responsibility and say yes or no, I've got too much on my plate, I can't, rather than assuming and not offering. So I think there is a very clear difference, and all it needs is a clear and open conversation. And once you do that, you can solve it. So the second point that I would like to now discuss is that how do we take this female inclusion that we are discussing, and considering our audience, hopefully 50% males, from becoming a female problem or women only discussing for women to a corporate opportunity? Because if there are 50% women in the population, as we were saying, that they are studying engineering, they are starting businesses, so they have an enormous amount to contribute to the bottom line, to the economic opportunity. So how do we develop and actually make it clear that it's a clear corporate opportunity? And how do we activate support from the male leadership? So Gary, I would like to bring you here. You knew it was coming to you. What are your thoughts on men to women sponsorship or advocacy for the female colleagues?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that I think more of us, including women, need to stop seeing this as a problem and start seeing it as an opportunity. In my career, I've had many examples of men stifling men, and I've also come across examples of women stifling women. I had a person in my training group when I first joined ABB who was told by our female boss, so female to female, don't speak to him because you have to do it via me. You're a typist, just type. That typist is now a senior HR manager in a global company, because I fired the boss and I helped the lady in question further develop. And I think this is where we need to get exposure to more enlightened leadership, male and female, both, whereby leaders are willing to identify talent. Leaders are talent scouts, and talent scouts go and look for talent. And good talent scouts don't really bother about whether it's male or female. They bother, as Stacey said earlier, are they talented people? But it's not enough to have talent. They need to have curiosity to be developed. That's how people grow. They learn, they develop, they grow. And we need more people who are keen to do that. And so what I would like to see, and indeed what we encouraged in ABB, was by all means have women's groups who discuss these things amongst women. But we always used to suggest, well, we didn't insist because we couldn't insist, but we always offered to deploy men to come and talk with those groups, because it's at that interface that some of the real issues and the things that can be resolved are overcome. I think the women to women is good, provided it doesn't reinforce the concept of it being a problem, provided it enforces the notion that this is an opportunity to expand and contribute to the organization. So from my perspective, the answer's blended, women to women, women to men. But I do think the role of leadership needs to be reviewed in the context of this enlightenment. And Poonam, if I can just mention a word that you alluded to earlier around getting people connected up so that they can help the organization. The word I love around this is alignment. It's not about doing it my way or doing it your way. It's about, through discussion, aligning on how we're going to do it. And again, in my personal experience and in most of the leadership teams that I've been responsible for, I've had a very significant female and ethnic presence. And I can tell you, we have hell of a good arguments. I love those arguments because you get better outcomes. If only all that happens is the boss comes in and says, this is how it's going to go, and everybody nods, you don't get good outcomes. You get the idea of one person rather than the team. So this is, the argument is valuable, and as long as you can align around the outcome. And that, for me, is a form of leadership that I still see too rarely in companies that I've been exposed to.
Absolutely, Gary, you're spot on. That alignment is the key there, because if we see only it as an opportunity, can we move forward? Because there is a 50% talent waiting there to be utilized if put forward in a right way and nurtured in a right way, and exactly utilized by working together towards attaining that goal. And as I say, we totally believe in that fear paralyzes and hope mobilizes. So if we start to look at it as a problem, half of it will always, and men will stay away from it, thinking it's a women's problem if you might not want to put your hand in the bee nest or something like that. Whereas women will feel isolated, alienated when talking about it. So the other aspect of it that is I would like to ask is, how important is the women-to-women sponsorship and that discussion and having that environment around to support each other, besides having gender-neutral groups, which I'm saying. So Shivon, can I bring you into the discussion to say what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll start with my personal experience, which is in my 22 years of working. Right now is the first time that I've reported to a female leader. So in the past, up until now, at my previous company and even at my current company, it's been a male. And so I have to say that I was probably a little bit more nervous about making that switch because, the idea that we talked about is making sure that women are supporting women, and also because I've been so used to having open and honest communication with those male leaders, I wasn't sure, was I going to get the same thing from a female? Because, in the past, I've been able to talk to those male leaders about career progression, about development opportunities, but most importantly, alluding to something that Gary said was, if I felt at any point where they were giving me different treatment, whether it was preferential treatment or just, making assumptions and not letting me have the power in the decision, I was able to communicate with them. So we've talked about a lot of great words, but I think communication is key, and the confidence to communicate is also key, because, for a lot of females, entering back into the workforce or entering the workforce for the first time, giving them that confidence to be able to have those conversations and say, hey, don't take that power or that decision making away from me. So I think there's definitely some work that we can do on the male to female. When you talk about the female to female, one of the things that our company is doing is we've set up a group called Lead Hers. So where you have leaders, it's now Lead Hers, and it's a group of senior women who get together on a quarterly basis, and whether it's networking, whether it's looking at development opportunities or training, we get together, one, so that we can support each other, and it doesn't have to be on gender issues or ethnicity issues, just supporting women being women and all the things that we deal with. But at the same time, we're also looking at how can we bring on those women that are maybe at the manager or the supervisor level. So how do we continue to bring up people behind us? But we recognize, to your question, Poonam, this is just a stepping stone, because this should not just be a conversation amongst women about women, right? But we can't go from 0 to 100 overnight. So there has to be a stepping stone in between. And this is the type of thing that we're doing as an organization to create that stepping stone. The last thing I'll say is, stories are a great thing. And Gary said, it's leaders look for opportunities, right? They look for talent. And so one of my previous leaders, when he was getting his car washed, the individual that was doing the car washing, he got into a conversation. So what are you doing? What would you like to do? And it turns out that that individual was studying and looking for future opportunities when they graduate. And right then and there, my old boss said, here's my information, contact me, because he recognized talent. in that even in just the most oddest of environments. And so I think we need to continue to do that, whether it's male or female, is looking for those opportunities as leaders to provide support to women or men, and also to bring them into the organization and then nurture them.
Absolutely brilliant. I think I would say we also have a similar organization here called Accelerator. So like the lead here, this is for business women to provide them an opportunity in terms of entrepreneurship. And I think what you said there is that both have its own place and both have different purposes as well, because having a gender neutral common groups to discuss broader areas, whereas sometimes women might feel more comfortable discussing certain issues and learning from their experiences, because mentoring and role modeling is absolutely key as well. So for women, what you can't see, you can't be. If they cannot see somebody in a senior position, maybe there is that inherent fear that, okay, nobody's there. All I see is a certain kind of a people across the table in senior positions, so how can I aspire to? So I think that role modeling, mentoring and aspiration aspect is also important, and bringing people, as Gary said, into discussion based on talent, based on merit. There is no preferential treatment discussion. What we are talking about is an access to opportunities and parity of opportunities so that people can rise and show and attain their full potential, be male or female. Stacey, I just wanted to bring your thoughts onto what discussion we are having. But when we are talking about diversity and inclusion, we are also talking different kinds of diversity, not just gender diversity. I'm more interested in diversity of thought, diversity of lived experiences, trans and binary people. So how do you think that we can include multiple types of diversity and make that part of our discussion and empowerment?
Thank you, Poonam. This is an excellent question, as it really gets to what has become known as the woman trap. So this is combated by having an intersectional approach to D&I. So imagine if you're a trans woman of color working for a company that's focusing on improving the ranks of women. By solely focusing on women, the company is communicating that they only care about one part of the employee's identity, that they are a woman. This is non-intersectional D&I work. If you ask people with multiple identities to wait their turn, and you might not even be asking them to wait their turn, but the fact that they're getting passed over, that they're not in the 9 box when you look at talent calibration, that's asking them to wait their turn. That contributes to further inequity. So all of the efforts must really be intertwined and deliberately focused on, because unfortunately a focus on women often becomes, I hate to say it, just white women. And if we can remove those obstacles for those that are unfairly held back by society, then those in the middle automatically benefit too. If I look at we did inclusive hiring for our leaders recently, and it's super basic, right? But it's getting to diverse teams increase their performance, but there's also a perceived impression that it's hard. It's harder than people who look like me, who sound like me, who talk like me, who come from different backgrounds. So getting that and constantly bringing it to the conversation that Joe and Gary have been talking about. If we look at even hiring, again, if you have one woman on a short list of 4 and there's 3 men, the chances of that woman getting hired is 0. If you have 3 women and 1 man, the chances is 67%. We're not there yet, but having these discussions really helps the organization. And the other thing I would add is systems. Are the systems really able to keep up with the changing demands that we have in our society? We recently looked at if you identify as a different person from, for example, if I identified as a male and I was going into my system to make an update, if I have the courage to make that update, will the system allow me to then say that I now identify as a male? or a female if that's not what my passport says. So we have a lot of ways to go to also work in partnership with companies, but also helping our leaders to constantly remind them in little subtle ways, this is where we see the bias, and this is where you just might not be aware of it. I think, you know, that Gary mentioned, share the stories and help make it front of mind so that people don't fall into these biases, because it's super easy to do.
Thank you, Stacey. I think the key emerging here is to increase the diversity, to avoid that groupthink, because people from similar experiences bring similar thoughts. And as a result, the organization and the boardroom exactly end up becoming the groupthink. One person says everybody attests to. Whereas the power of that diverse discussion only comes when people from different lived experiences, different backgrounds, different genders, different thinking comes into the discussion, because that is where people might even propose or oppose your thought or even put a different perspective. And that is where the bottom line value increases, because now you have a different point to consider, which somebody from a similar thought, similar experiences might not even consider, because they never had it, they never faced it, they never even consider it. So I think excellent from the point of view that bringing along everybody, but bringing along in such a way that they feel part of the discussion, not excluded, and providing those enhanced opportunities. So thank you for that. And now we'll move on to our third and final topic for the day. So we have had the link between the diversity and the bottom line. Who should we be talking to? Why we should be talking to the diverse type of people? And so how do we challenge the future? And how do we change the future to achieve that wonderful future that we all dream of? So that brings me to the theme for the International Women's Day 2021. It is Choose to Challenge. And the day marks a call to action for accelerating gender parity, because the 2020 has shown us that inequalities have enhanced difficulties for marginalized societies. And it's not just in developed countries, it's not just in Northern, everywhere, developing countries to developed countries, to rich societies, poorer societies. But those who were marginalized because of the COVID-19, the situation has become even harder for them. According to World Economic Forum, none of us will see gender parity in our lifetime, and nor likely many of our children and many generations of our children. The pandemic presents both threats and opportunities in relation to achieving more diverse workforces, and we will be looking at that. The CBI has warned that economic downturn will stall even more reverse progress on diversity and inclusion. For example, UK government reported on the gender pay gap was suspended due to outbreak, and we have seen return on all male boards in 350, because when the going is tough, isn't it that we return back to our old habits and males will solve the problems, whereas we females might not be so capable for that. So going back to the old adage there. Women and ethnic minorities have been among the most affected by the economic fallout. Given that they represent 3/4 of the part-time labor force, they were hit hardest when the part-time jobs fell 70%, and in the first 11 weeks of the pandemic. And BAME workers, over a third, were more than likely be the workers that were made redundant or left out to temporary and zero work hour. But clearly, the changes that has happened to our work patterns, flexibility, they also offer clear opportunities, strategic agility, and that opens up opportunities as well. So the question is, how can a pandemic working environment, which opens up home working and enables greater flexibility through technology, accelerate the move to equal opportunities? And what have been the opportunities as well as challenges for diverse and ethnic minority groups and people of color? So Joe, if I could bring you into the conversation and say, where do you see last year, what learnings has this provided, but what challenges has it posed?
Yeah, of course. I think COVID-19 and the pandemic has offered up opportunities for transformation and agility across the board. I think it's turned the world on its head in so many ways. And companies that will be successful will harness that in a positive way. And I think technology definitely will play a key role there. I think we're probably misguided if we assume that just because technology in theory offers that flexibility to work from home, that will somehow level the playing field from a gender perspective. You know, that's probably a kind of a middle class professional view, and probably comes with bias to some extent there. I think, you know, it depends on your socioeconomic situation. It depends on, you know, to your earlier point, you know, this specific industry. You know, a lot of, you know, women are employed in certain industries where the practicalities of working from home and transitioning that career to a work from home environment just isn't possible. And so arguably, as the World Economic Forum reports kind of have pointed out, it will set us back in some way. But I think it brings into question what's the role of the corporates in this? What's the role of government? What's kind of the broader role with all of the stakeholders in order to kind of to leverage technology in support of a wider transformation, which hopefully gender equality will play a significant part.
Thank you, Jo. So Shivon, if I could bring you back onto the same point, that what have you seen the 2020 changed the working pattern and the challenges it might have created, but at the same time that opportunities for future of work, and where does that place diversity and inclusion initiatives, as Jo was calling that there is a role for corporates and governments?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I think we're going to be calculating the impact of COVID-19 for many years to come. You know, we're not even out of it, as you would say. You know, for me, if I take the US perspective and provide some information there, you know, in 2020, we had over 2 million women leave the workforce, and that means they were either not working or not even looking for jobs. And also, when it came to the net jobs, you had women lost over 5 million net jobs, while men, it was only 4.5 million. Now, we know that, you know, we've all been in recessions before, but I think what's different about this recession that we're already seeing is that, you know, previously where a lot of those jobs have come back, it's likely that many of them are permanently lost, right? And so regardless of who's in those positions, we're just not going to see the same type of bounce back. For me, I think it's particularly heartbreaking because in the US in 2020, for the first time, women actually surpassed men with the number of US jobs held. And, you know, depending on how the rest of this year goes, I think it's going to be very different. I think the other kind of unfortunate side effect of COVID-19 was that you saw that when it came to the kind of household activities, the cognitive labor, it was women that ended up taking a step back from their jobs and taking on those roles, right? So whether it be taking care of the household, taking care of the kids, but it was women that kind of stepped into that role. But there is, you know, I don't want it to be all negative. I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel. You know, we're already seeing some organizations here in the US actually push for means-tested monthly payments for moms, especially because they are the ones that are doing these full-time roles of educating the kids, especially with as homeschooling continues, or caregivers. So I think there is some opportunities there where we can work with organizations and the government. But I think when it comes to corporates, it's really looking at as you bring back those employees, or you start to look at what is the future world going to look like, how do you create more flexibility, right? So with flexibility will come agility, and that's going to help an organization. But I think giving that flexibility to whether it be women or men is really going to help to bring some of that balanced workforce back. We won't get it all back. I think that's very clear. But I think being able to say you can work from home a couple of days a week, or hey, we've now got the technology where you can take that call in the car on Zoom and you don't need to be on camera. I think allowing some of that flexibility as corporates think about what the future world looks like is going to help bring the balance back. But, you know, I think it's very clear we're not going to get back to at least where we were at the beginning of 2020, which is, you know, very disappointing.
Thank you, Shivon, and thank you, Jo, for that. I think what is clearly coming to light is that while a digital transformation 10 years worth may have taken place in 3 months, but not everybody had equal access to those digital tools. depending on your socioeconomic status, depending upon the place where you are living, you might not have access to digital devices, tools, or even simple broadband, which some people are calling maybe a human right becoming that. But the other aspect of that is also that the industries that were hit hardest, whether it's the retail or whether it's the hospitality or travel, female tend to be more in those frontline jobs in those industries. They were affected by lockdown, shutdown, but at the same time, because of those lockdowns, homeschooling, and caring responsibilities, sadly, it is still a part of the thing that when there is a crisis at the house, they were the first one to either out of sheer responsibility raise their hand or opted out of the job or were made redundant. So as you say, to play catch up with those loss of jobs for women and ethnic minority, it will take time, and the government policymakers as well as corporates will really have to look at their policies to say, how do we bring benefits back to that workforce, provide them opportunities to make it a level field, those who have lost it. Because the other aspect of it, that once the economic downturn happens, those who have lost earnings and incomes, that will create more unequal divide among the world. And as we have seen in the COVID-19, it seems to be also gender and race phobic, because somehow COVID-19 seems to affect Black and ethnic minorities more. And then there are various factors. The people are still studying, and there was yesterday a program on BBC, how it is affecting certain people of certain races more. I think there are more socioeconomic factors. There are places where we live and how it has affected people who are working on the front line, the stress level that they feel. So it's a complex picture, but it does pose that, as I said in the beginning, bringing back that environment of making it well-being focused, but also making the environment comfortable enough for people to want to step back into that workforce. So I think we have outlined that while there is an opportunity, there's also been challenges which we need to address as long term, because the impact is not going to be short term, and climate change is definitely not adding anything positive. So we need to work together on that. The other point that I would like to address now, and final point, is that in addition to addressing bias in certain established industries, which we've noticed that in corporate sector, in other industries, it's there. If we want to look, and I want to end this discussion on a positive note, to say how can we avoid this in future bias with the emerging technologies in the driven industries, and how can we look and suggest something more hopeful so that we all come together and look to make a situation and workplaces happier and better for everybody.
Poonam, can I add here?
Absolutely.
I have 3 magic suggestions. Okay, so the first one, we can benchmark. So by collecting and analyzing data on diversity over time, comparing the numbers to the numbers at other companies, sharing them with the stakeholders that need to know, the companies can increase accountability and transparency around those issues. And we're fortunate that leading tech companies they're having their feet to the fire with transparency, so that's a good thing. The second thing is we can listen to our employees. The younger generation of workers are more socially aware. They're willing to tackle their biases. These employees are driving change within the companies. Employers know if they attract the top talent, they must not only have a strong mission and values, but they must also live and breathe them and be open to transparency, because the younger generation will call us out. And the third and important thing is for companies, for leaders to be really held accountable and to think boldly about how to really make a difference. One of the things that our CEO just shared with his leaders was holding people accountable through compensation. And that can make a really big difference, because as we know, money is important. So those would be my 3 things, Poonam.
Fantastic, thank you. It's for providing some of the concrete examples, and at the same time, as you say, we are holding this planet for our future generations, and they will hold us accountable to see what kind of ancestors we were. So we have to provide the right example there. Gary, can I bring you for your final thoughts on the very same topic, that how can we bring hope into it, and what would you suggest?
Well, let me first of all divulge I'm much more of an optimist than many of these august bodies that are predicting doom, gloom, and uncertainty. I think through the pandemic, you've seen established industries operate at an incredible speed to completely change what they were outputting. Who would have thought Formula One racing would start producing ventilators? Who would have thought that gin companies would start producing hand sanitizer? Not in months, not in weeks, but in days. And above all else, who would have thought we'd have had a virus within 12 months, a vaccine within 12 months? This shows the ability of organizations to innovate and respond. And I'm optimistic that you'll see a massive surge in many of those types of innovations in established industries. In some ways, the new industries have got the advantage that most of them have a younger workforce. And that what Stacey was saying about younger people is great. But Stacey, I'd only say they might be able to challenge the biases that they've got, that they know they've got, but it's the hidden ones that really go beneath the surface. So we still need enlightened leadership to encourage people to confront those things. I also think artificial intelligence can do a lot to bring a greater degree of objectivity to the whole processes of selection and development and promotion and so on. And rather than incentivized through money, Stacey, I would rather see people being incentivized through challenges to identify the amount of talent they develop, the number of people they take a chance on, the amount of time they spend walking. My nickname in ABB was "What's the Gossip, Jimmy?" Because all over the world, everywhere I went, I used to go and walk around the factory floor or the office block and just sit in people's desks and say, "What's the gossip?" And it's amazing what you can find out, A, about people, and B, about what's going on in the culture, just by doing simple things like that. So you might call me a daydreamer. You might even think I'm a bit wacky now that I'm retired or semi-retired, but I'm optimistic that the organizations will respond in an appropriate and incredible way. But above all else, in the whole area of diversity, we've opened up the Pandora's box already. There's much more voice to women and ethnic minorities than there ever was in the era, even just 2 years ago. So that's not going to be easy to put back in its box and forget about, I hope. That's there, and it's going to have to be dealt with. And I'm telling you, I think I've said this in many different fora, the process of development, engagement, and improving company performance is a full body contact sport, and there will have to be some casualties. It needs some senior people to be taking out. I saw a couple of bank CEOs last week saying that all this working from home stuff was an aberration. It's not a new way forward. That's baloney. I mean, we've disproved the notion that working from home's bad. Now, it's not good for everybody, as Shivon was saying. And in fact, I'd hate it personally, but I don't have to be worried about it. But I think if you build this into a kind of series of choices to help people work, and I can't remember, 2 or 3 people said it, the ability to have a dialogue with somebody as to what they're able to do and what they would like to do. Everybody thinks that'll take more time. I can assure you, having the dialogue is much quicker than just ignoring it and doing something because you think it's the right thing to do. So I am optimistic, and my optimism is built around enlightened leadership.
Thank you, Gary. Definitely optimism and optimistic attitude is what we need to project it as an opportunity, the issue we are discussing, the situation we find ourselves in, and the challenges that our climate challenges face for our planet. And as I said, while there have been challenges with the COVID-19 situation, we can look forward positively. Our GlobalScot network's response to the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrates the high level of connection and collaboration that exists with diversity of skills and experiences, and that have no doubt contributed to this. Working together, staying on the topic, I would say it has helped us tackle the critical issue of business resilience. protecting productivity and building new and innovative supply chain around personal protective equipment and related supply to the NHS and care sector. So as you were saying, that I would like to give my regards and thanks to the NHS frontline staff and which have done it, and all to the scientists and the industry and the startup entrepreneurs and the policymakers that have worked around the clock to bring these multiple vaccines to people, because that seems to be our only way out. So definitely collaboration is key. There is positive hope around that. If we put our minds, we can achieve the inevitable which was seen, because last year we weren't sure that we will have a vaccine by now, because there is a normal record of 6 to 10 years in NEC. So now is the time to bring on that collaborative working and to ensure that we have the broadest access possible to new ideas, new initiatives that have been discussed, put them into practice to support economic recovery for us here in Scotland, in the UK and globally, and placing even more importance for a fair and just society. As we say, inequalities have increases for diversity and inclusion. And on a positive note, I would say Scottish Government has a gender balanced cabinet and our Scottish enterprise has a gender balanced board. And many organizations in Scotland and world around put strong initiatives and value on bridging those skills gap and drive economic and inclusive participation. So let's hope for that in the positivity. And over the next 6 months, there has been, in the last 6 months, we have seen our GlobalScot team has seen a significant number of GlobalScot membership, and it continues to diversify. But as I said in the beginning, and I would like to circle back to the same opportunity, that please help us spotlight more diverse talent around the world, discuss them, showcase their talent, and bring them into the fore. A refreshed digital GlobalScot network website is there. The team is there to help you. It will be crucial to support Scotland's ambition and to support Scotland's businesses in their recovery and growth. And I'm sure you will all agree with me. That's why you're here, giving your time and your thought leadership to help companies with your network, opening the market access and supporting. And then there is no doubt that such an open, vibrant, collaborative and inclusive network is a powerful force for change. It is true that attitude change is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So let's make sure that together we develop that diversity-focused attitude for longer-term gains. And with that, I would like to say thank you, Stacey, thank you, Shivon, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Gary, together for your wonderful thoughts. And I'm sure our audience will enjoy this discussion and be in touch with the team. And thank you to the GlobalScot team and Melissa and Julie and Kate for organizing this.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.